Alright guys, welcome. So, those of you who've been watching very closely will know I made a thing recently. Maybe you saw the stream where I discussed this. Maybe you've been watching some of my Game of the Day videos and you've noticed it going on in the background. But I actually made a taco marker pack over the past 2 to 3 weeks. A little bit less than that, actually. And I'm not entirely happy with it. But I figure, hey, I've done a thing. I may as well, for once, actually finish it up and release it. So, yeah, I guess I have to talk a little bit about what this is for those of you completely out of the loop here. Basically, in PvP, when it comes to the maps that you're playing, you have, of course, the terrain around the nodes to think about, your position, how to get to them, and how that affects, like, team fighting. So, for example, here on Skyhammer, the mid node is quite cluttered, it's quite close in. You also have, for each different map, the matter of the secondary objective. So, for Skyhammer, it means going up to that platform up there and triggering the hammer and what that does. But when you become a little bit higher level at PvP, you start thinking about some other stuff, and that's essentially how you use the terrain to survive and to play around certain aspects of the skills that are in the game and what's going on. So Skyhammer is a really, really good example of this because the devs very clearly understood that about the player base and baked into the map terrain different things people can use for kiting, okay? So that term, you may not necessarily know what it means. It means, say, if I'm in a 1v1 at point B here, and I start struggling, I start losing, and I'm getting low on health, and my cooldowns aren't very available. What I should do is, instead of dying and suiciding the point, I should kite away. I should try to run away and survive until my cooldowns come back and I can get back in. Essentially, the idea of running away as a resource to resustain. And players were doing this a lot with the initial trilogy of maps. So when the devs started adding new ones, such as Skyhammer here, they really started to add into that, right? So on Skyhammer, they added these jump pads and these areas up here for you to kite around on. And these are really, really powerful for shaking aggro from people. For example, whenever you're on a ledge like this, if, say, a warrior was chasing me, I can jump like that. Well, except not mess it up. I can jump, making him think that I'm falling down, but in mid-air, turn around and stay up, right? And then I've shaken him off me completely, and he's forced to want a range set he might not have, and I can resustain, right? So having ledges and places that you can dupe people and just run away to are really, really strong. There's another side of it as well that Skyhammer shows very well, and that's the way that shadow stepping and teleporting works in Guild Wars 2. While you're up on those ledges, you can't actually, if I'm a class using blink or TP skills, I can't actually blink up there. We get the dreaded no valid path to target. Now, for most PvE players, when you see no valid path, you're going to think that this is an artifice, a poor part of the game and something to be frustrated at. But when it comes to PvP, this is actually a legitimate thing to understand when it will trigger and how to play around it, right? So one of the strengths of this area is that people can't just teleport up. They actually have to use the jump pads. They have to go through certain set designated areas. Now, once we're up, we're on a new nav mesh, and we can teleport around, as makes sense here. But how you play with the nav mesh is kind of a big thing, right? And Skyhammer is really fun. So a lot of it's very obvious, right? If I'm running away from a thief, or, you know, a core guardian who's seeking to burst me, if I just jump over this gap, you're not allowed to teleport across gaps like that. You are in a separate nav mesh, and so any guardian here, I could be on 2 health, and he's trying to use Judge's Intervention, a targeted teleport ability. He will not be able to get to me, all right? And there's a lot of skills like that in Guild Wars 2 at the moment. There's a lot of teleportation abilities, like Blink and Jaunt here. I can't jaunt up there. I first have to jaunt here and then jump across, and then I can jaunt around. And, you know, you've got blinks. But there's also targeted ones, right? Like Illusionary Ambush, which I can only trigger if I have a target. Or Judge's Intervention for the Guardian. Or Sword 2 for the Guardian. Or a very important one, Steal for Thieves. All thieves have Steal. And, well, I mean, if you're a Deadeye, things kind of change, I guess. But, you know, Steal is a very, very obvious cooldown that a lot of players will have in most Conquest games you're going up against. And learning how to use locations like this is really, really important. And there's a couple of things I want to express. First of all, as shown by Skyhammer, as shown by Eternal Colosseum as well, one of the other new maps, the devs understand this and bake it into the game. It is there by design. When it comes to the original 3 maps, though, which kite spots, which jumping puzzles, which no teleportation spots are actually there becomes really kind of obscure and hard to see and hard to tell, because back then the devs didn't really know what they were playing with. So while it's transparent here, On those earlier maps, it's kind of like a game within the game to know where all those places are and how best to utilize them. And that's what this marker pack does. It's kind of knowledge that is anyone who's been PvPing for a while will know about, and isn't particularly special, but it's knowledge that a lot of new players totally miss out on. And what I wanted to do was kind of document what all of these different spots are, as many as I know through my years having PvP'd, and actually mark them down so that with a taco, you know, what is taco? Tactical markers, right? So I can clearly show new players and myself, hey, there's a spot here, right? So at any point while I'm playing the game, if I'm, you know, in danger and I'm trying to escape, well, hey, I can see my marker pack and it's like, oh, here, look, you can actually stand here and there'll be no valid path and maybe you'll be safe if you come up here. Or, you know, failing that, maybe I want another location where I can shake some aggro from someone so, you know, I can actually climb into this corner that people might not know about. You know, someone following me might mess up and then they've ended up falling down and they can't quite get their attacks on me here, giving me time to then turn around and run in the other direction. So, throughout the years, there have been a lot of different videos from many renowned intelligent PvPers hoping to help the scene out, where they've done their YouTube video guides explaining kite spots and port spots and, you know, just terrain jumps and stuff, which really is at the heart of higher end PvP. It's a part of PvP that I really love. There's lots of those out there. I didn't really go into this project trying to one-up those videos or to say, hey, I can do better or whatever. I think they all have a lot of meaning, and not everything that I've documented originally came from me. Personally, I don't really care who originally found a thing. I just care that the level of play and the bar of understanding for new players is raised to a point that everyone can have fun, right? So I never came into this project trying to compete with that stuff. I just wanted to make a marker pack. Well, now that I've made the marker pack, I kind of wanted to announce it to everyone as I release it. So at this point now, you guys should understand the idea behind it. And you can find a link in the description, if you know how Taco works, to the marker pack I've built, and you can run with it if you like. What I'm also going to do, though, is for every one of these icons, I'm going to explain to you guys what they mean, and I'm going to do a separate video for each map that I've currently covered with markers to show you all why the marker is there and what it's supposed to represent. That won't be in this video. This is just kind of an introductory thing. But yeah, so I'll do a separate video on each map, and hopefully that's a nice resource for you guys. It's just supposed to be a companion piece to the marker pack that I've released, rather than, you know, again, trying to compete with other kite spots. And, like, it's not supposed to be a definitive kite spot video series. I'm sure other people have done much better, and I don't want anybody to be angry that I'm trying to do one as well here. So there is another big topic that I really want to express in this video, and that's the idea of this being cheaty. And I really hate that I have to have this conversation, because I don't believe that it's a thing whatsoever. But many of you... Originally, I was going to put this video on my main channel, Wooden Potatoes 1, because I wanted everyone to see it, and I wanted everyone to be excited, and I wanted to talk about, you know, this side of the game that so many PvEers don't appreciate. However, experience has taught me, with the amount of random comments I've got from just passers-by watching my Game of the Day stuff, there is a significant amount of you that think this is, like, ban-worthy or super cheaty or whatever. Well, so let's talk about it. First of all, Taco as a tool, as a thing, is not a ban-worthy thing. It is an overlay that does not interface with the game on any deeper level than just overlaying stuff in front of your screen. All it can do is represent information that is out there in the community anyway. So there's nothing wrong with Taco. If Taco is allowed to show you routes through jumping puzzles and stuff, you may think, oh, that's not a very good, sign of intelligence that you have to follow a marker pack to get through a jumping puzzle. But it stands that people like using it for jumping puzzles, and they've been allowed to use it explicitly by the dev for however long in PvE. So why not in PvP? I don't know why there would have to be that bar there. As far as I'm concerned, and I explained this in a YouTube comment already, and I'll quote myself here, I am not under the impression that skill in PvP is the privilege of knowing a thing exists. Skill is about how you utilize these things and when to utilize them, and particularly for, like, the jumpy ones, you know, where you're doing a tricky jump hoping that the other person will fail to do it. You know, that's about muscle memory and timing and understanding, which the marker pack has got nothing to do with. I don't agree with this idea that skill-based PvP is about hoarding and hiding information. It's just very odd as a concept, right? Like, if people do guides about how to find kite spots and what they've learned over the years, why not have a pack that goes a little bit further and helps people with that? You know, it's not an automatically win thing. So I personally don't understand on any level, any argument or gut feeling anyone has that this is even remotely cheaty. I really don't on any level. But if you do, then feel free to be outraged. We'll see how things go. But yeah, I sort of don't care for those discussions, to be honest. I've made the pack. I think it's cool. I've utilized it, and it's helped me a little bit in games. And the idea is that it can help. People in the PvP community constantly complain that the bar isn't high enough, that people aren't good enough, blah, 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 blah. Well, this is a really good tool as far as I'm concerned to help get those lower bar players up to a better standard. Because as much as many PvPers who are still playing this game's competitive side like to whine that players aren't good enough, none of them will actually get off their ass and help the community. Or very few of them will get off their ass and help the community. So, yeah, let's actually, instead of just sitting on high horses and pedestals and sneering down at everyone, let's show people in useful ways how the game is played. And I think the marker pack's good for that. So there you go. That's that whole discussion there. I'm going to close this video out as well by reading the README I am bundling with the marker pack, just so you guys understand the basic principles. And I'll have a timestamp in the description so people can skip right to this bit, because the rest of this has all been preamble. So what is it exactly that you're looking at here in Skyhammer? Well, here's what I have to say in the README. This marker pack is designed to show all the practical and worthwhile terrain spots that I, Wooden Potatoes, use and know about in PvP. So some of these are things I knew back from when I was a serious PvPer back in like early 2013, late 2012, in the early days before there was any kind of a scene. Some of them are more recent things that I've seen people talking about in 2017, 2018. Some of them, I had a person actually came in game after seeing some of the Game of the Days and showed off some cool ones on Kylo and Legacy. So I'm not claiming, you know, to have ownership of all of these spots, but largely it's things I've found and no ports I know about and that have been utilizing and filtered in with some other stuff, okay? So, but the fact is, this marker pack, they are supposed to be the practical and worthwhile ones that I actually use, okay? So we've got some different kinds of spots here, right? First of all, there are kite spots, and here you will see a flag. This is a kite spot, okay? Kite spots. These represent jumps and short routes through the map that are useful to use for escaping from fights, and particularly from escaping from melee-oriented pressure. Okay, so this would be one such example. If you're running away from someone you're really low health, hey, you can actually jump on this, and they might not be expecting it, and they might overshoot, and they'll fall off, and now you're alive, and they haven't managed to get the kill. And that means everything in PvP, it really does. And, you know, you can jump back across, and guess what? You're back on no port, and it's really frustrating to climb all the way up and back around, okay? Just a very useful, simple thing. And so, to remind you that this exists, or maybe teach you that this exists, because you may have never done it before, I have a little flag here, right? That is a kite spot. Yeah, if you ever see a flag with a skull on it, that's a kite spot. You should try to move through these areas and execute these jumps, hoping that the aggressor will fail to follow. Then re-engage on them once your defensive cooldowns are, you know, resuming. So if I was a chrono and I was about to get my deja vu and whatever back, then at this point I could, you know, re-engage on the node and re-pick up the fight, hoping that someone will come and plus me or whatever, right? And these are obviously good spots to go to as well when you are being plus. When you are suddenly outnumbered, you can run away to one of these locations. So a green flag, okay, green spots are the most accessible ones that I know about, and they're very easy to utilize. So this flag, it's not hard to jump to this, right? So it's green. It's easy. And you might think, well, that's good, okay, the easy one. This is very good for beginners, but you have to remember, any easy jump, it's just as easy to be followed too, okay? So green doesn't mean bad because it's for beginners necessarily. It just means that your odds of it saving your life are lower, right? So green are easy ones. Amber ones are more difficult to execute, but also might be a little bit less known and thus increasing the risk, the reward, right? So this spot here, this is a kite spot, okay? Once again, we're coming here. Most of the time when I come here, it would be to escape from melee-oriented pressure. I'd hope that they'd fall down, and then I'd run through the other side, especially because you can blink through the wall there on a Mirage, right, with a jaunt, and then you can run off. And they might turn around to go up the ramp, and they're totally screwed, right? But this is a little bit more slippery. It's a little bit more tricky, and when you're in combat, don't forget you tend to move a little bit slower. You can, you know, mess it up a bit, right? So an amber spot is a little bit less known, and thus a little bit more likely for you to fail, but also for the opponents to fail too, okay? Some understanding of how to utilize them is good idea before you try and use them actually in a match. And what I'm going to do is videos in a second where I explain all of these orange flags. This introductory one obviously is showing this off, but the other one's later, okay? And then red, so where's a red flag on this map? Do I have any red flags? Remember, so they get harder. The red flags are, I'll read my description, are very little known and difficult to utilize, often requiring jump dodges or super speed. It is unlikely you'll want to try them without a lot of practice, but they likely guarantee survival if you can pull them off in the right context and use them at the right time. I'm not sure I actually have any red flags marked on this map. So there are a lot of crazy jumps you can do, right, on all of the maps. But if they are not practical or worthwhile, they don't make it into the pack whatsoever. So just because you see a red flag, it's not just really, really difficult flags. It's, they have to be practical to some extent too. So like, for example, over here, you can jump. Like, there's a really weird, wonky thing you can do quite high up on this rock and land up here. But practically speaking, I've never in my life used that, and it's not worthwhile. Okay, so some of the maps have red flags, and that's the idea. It's difficulty, right? And that's what you want to think of as you go through, all right? So that's the flags, but then there is another variety. We've started a game, and I really don't want to be in a game. So let's go into another map here. I'll show you guys Legacy, all right? So that's flags, right? They're escaping melee-oriented pressure, and they're running away. There's also no port spots, which I've got marked. Now, a location like that is exclusively there just to prevent things like judges' intervention and steal and whatnot, okay? So my readme says this. These represent locations on the map that enemies cannot teleport to or from because they are not areas connected to the nav mesh's pathing. They are especially useful when fighting shadow step and teleport-oriented skills like steal, judges' intervention, polaric leap, and so on. Many classes have them available, right? Many no port spots double up as kite ones, but it's not necessarily always true. So this is a good example, okay? If you have been in mid and you're running away and you're super low health and you're trying to get to your base or whatever, or maybe you're low health and you're coming out of the base, you might not know this, but if you jump onto this rock, because you are elevated, just like on Skyhammer, because you are elevated while you're on this rock, you are not connected to the nav mesh. And so you cannot teleport off, and you can teleport to other areas of the rock. It's its own grid, right? But people cannot teleport to you. They cannot gap close to you. So if there's a Rev, right, using his Shiro port and his Death Strike and stuff, he will try it, but he won't move. And you'll see like a Guardian uses his hammer too and just stays in place, right? So this is really useful to survive if you're kiting away. Here's another good example here as well. But these are only really useful as denying teleportation, right? So, you know, any melee person can follow you up here. So this is a no port spot, all right? It's not really about anything else, and it's an easy one. So it's green. Similar situation. Green spots are the most easy ones to utilize. Additionally, there'll also be, if it's a green spot and I've got it marked, it's probably going to be in a really useful location on the map. So this is a good one as well, because it's kind of getting close to mid. And again, if you're standing on here, there's no valid path. These spots have very obvious boundaries. If they're green, then, you know, it's obvious where you're getting the advantage. And they can even be large enough as well that you can move around and dodge. And that's kind of important as well. I'm a Mirage right now, so my dodges don't even matter. But a no port spot where you can dodge roll and stay on the no port spot is even more useful, okay? Because if you're being aggressed by a thief and he forces you to dodge and then you fall off of the spot, then he can steal immediately afterwards or whatever. So, you know, a spot where you can dodge. So green in this case isn't necessarily about easiness. It's about how good they are, right? If they're in a really useful location, or if they're big, or if, you know, they're easy to actually play around on once you're on them, okay? But likewise, there are other versions as well. So here's an amber no port spot. So this one's amber. It's still pretty easy to get to. It's still pretty clear, you know, at what point we are on no valid path. We can't teleport back up or anything. But the location of this makes it a little bit more tricky. This kind of doubles up as a kite spot as well. But so I've marked it as a no port because to me, the more important factor in this is that it's no port. I will use this for no port more often than I will kiting melee aggression. Now, in truth, you can use it to kite melee aggression. You can drop down and then you know that the platform's here, but they don't, and they overshoot or whatever, and you can do that in lots of places. Kylo around CT is very good for that as well. I was actually thinking about having a whole different marker for that. But yeah, so that's an amber one. And then there are red no ports as well, which are, again, if there's lots of weird little places in these maps where you'll just be off the nav mesh, and maybe it's kind of cool to know about, but they're not useful. The really useful ones, though, I have. So here's a red no port, okay? Now, this is amazing because it's on a node, right? And this one, you can see with the earlier maps, the devs, this is probably not intended whatsoever, right? And so the newer map design is much more clear. In the earlier maps, it's kind of, you know, there's some broken spots here, and I do not deny those, and I would like the devs to actually nerf some of these away. But this red one here, for example, this is super useful because anyone running at you, you can get a full cap or a decap or whatever because they can't close the gap with a steal or whatever, or, you know, judges and so on. But you have to be very precise on this. You have to stand at the right place. And so here the marker pack's pretty useful. It's a red no port because you might not know where it is without it, right? And this one here, this rock is actually no port. This was actually one that I didn't know about, but courtesy of one of the members of the community showed me off. So, yeah, now hopefully you can see the value of this. By the way, the red one here, I totally accept is very cheesy, and you might think, well, that's totally unintended by the devs. However, I will point out that on this map, I mostly have that in a sense of fair play and balance and symmetry, because on this map, there's also a no port on a node. Over here at the quarry, when you're on this like this gravel, this is no port too. So I thought if there's an easy one on this node, it's only fair I show people there is one on the other, right? And again, like, why should that information be hoarded to just a couple of us who found out about that way back when, right? And you know, there's some other ones around. So I would like to see the devs, and I've for a long time wanted to see the devs do a pass on these earlier maps and make some of this stuff clear, especially some of the kite spots where you're working around invisible walls. But basically, anywhere that there's a jumping puzzle and stuff on these maps, I've got marked as a thing. There is one final thing as well that I've got marked, just as some kind of a general thing. I'll show you on a third map, and it's this icon here. So these are line of sight spots. So while kite spots are pretty good for melee pressure, line of sight ones are locations I would usually use to skirt away from projectile-based and range-based pressure. So, for example, if we come to Legacy here, under this bridge is super. If you're bailing out of mid and there's a PvP ranger following you, this is such a premium location to come to. And just as a reminder that these places exist, is very, very useful. And I've got these on the marker pack wherever they're relevant. You'll find with the no line of sight spots, these are quite clearly dev intended, and these quite often mark fairly large areas of the map and interesting areas of the map for kiting. So yeah, that's the three kinds of markers I have right now. That's what I've released, and you will find in the description. There is a lot further we could go with this. For example, classes with leaps get a whole other world of things that they can do. So here you can actually kite through there. That's very safe. When you have a leap, there's all kinds of things you can do. So like any kind of leap, for example, these pillars, you can actually land on with the correct spacing. I can't remember the movement. Maybe it's only vaulting with a staff or whatever you can do here. But like, that is build specific, right? And I don't know whether I really want to do build specific stuff. The marker pack as I've built it right now, it doesn't matter whether you queue on a warrior. It doesn't matter what you queue on. Every single icon is available to you if you know it. And the video companions I'll do to this, hopefully, will show you guys, because I'll demonstrate and explain every single one I know. But yeah, leaps is one thing, and maybe there's another iteration of the pack that you guys could build for yourselves, by the way. It's super easy. Just go to the Taco website. He shows you how to make them so easily. You've got that, and then the other one is port spots, okay? So, like, being able to teleport from here. See, I don't even know this spot very well right now. You got to, like, get it just right. But there's a way to TP, there you go, right over the ledge here, right? Which, again, I'm pretty sure that's dev unintended, because way back in the day, these were all valid, and now it's just very precise positioning that lets you through. And, like, another, you know, very famous one is from here, you can actually teleport through that little cave there with the waterfall, and then all of a sudden you're behind this huge wall, and people are unlikely to be able to follow you and all that good stuff. You know, there's lots of those as well. My marker pack does not include those. My marker pack also does not include out-of-bounds breaks. So, I mean, it kind of does. So here, for example, this rock you can play around on. And when you learn sort of how fiddly the positioning is, this is not so bad. But you can climb on this rock and up to this flag. Now, from that flag, you can actually start breaking fully out of the map, and you can go behind invisible walls and all kinds of stuff. This marker pack, I haven't included any of that. That stuff's way too cheesy and is obviously dev unintended and is obviously a far cry from the Skyhammer stuff. So anything ridiculous and just broken and bad for the game that the devs clearly don't care about, I have not included. With one exception, and that's on Kylo. I will show you that. So here on Kylo, a very well-known location you can kite to, all right, is up here. You can come onto this whole wall here. And I'm pretty sure that there's supposed to be an invisible wall stopping us from going through that, but it got broke at some point, like, a long time ago now. The devs have not fixed. I don't think they even... I don't know how much attention they pay to this side of the game anymore. I'm really sorry to say. But, this, I've got marked because this is fair and this is valid, and people use this all the time. I don't think that there's any problem with that. However, there is no invisible wall on the other side. So if you come through the other side, you can escape Kylo that easily. I mean, it's horrendous, to be honest. I don't really want people doing this. I don't want people utilizing this in games. So I actually have the marker pack. There is a way to get back in. It's tricky if you don't know how to do it, but you have to basically climb up a very specific way, and then you can walk up this invisible wall, and about that flag, you can jump back over. So I have the route marked to get you back in, but no further. That's the only time an out of bounds ever interacts with the marker pack, because in the spirit of fair play, I don't think... You know, the kind of crazy stuff you can do where you go underwater and attack the enemy lord from underwater and Legacy and stuff. I'm not including that. I'm not trying to do anything genuinely wrong here, right? So, yeah, and let me just reiterate, again, this isn't everything. Anything impracticably different, that are nonetheless possible, I just don't have, right? If they're too punishing, for example, in an actual game, for example, one of the things you can do over here on this hut is you can climb up, and from this second no port spot up here, which I've got marked as kite, because if you're using no port, you only really need the lower one. If you use a teleport at the right position here, you can actually blink on top of this, which is really cool, but it's impractical in a game. And there are other ways of getting on top if you have a leap and stuff. So, yeah, anything impractical, you guys might play this and say, oh, WP didn't have X, Y, and Z. And there might be a lot of really valid things I don't have, but some of it's just there's no point in having it there. And finally, when it comes to no ports, anything that's redundant, I don't have. So, Kylo's probably a good map for it as well here. So, for example, this is as close as the redundancy gets. This is a no port spot, right? If you are low health here and trying to run away from some kind of teleportation-based aggression, you're going to use this rock because it's big, you can dodge on it, it's obvious, it's comfortable. You're unlikely to use this one here, right? So I've got this marked as red because it's actually much more precise positioning. Most of the time when there's two no ports right next to one another, I've only included the easiest and best. But maybe this is worthwhile. So yeah, and then finally, the other thing about it... Well, no, we'll leave it there. And so I'm going to do individual videos about all the individual spots that I've got marked out so you guys can use as a companion. But check out the link in the description. You can download that, install the marker pack, and hopefully have fun. I will warn you, Taco lagged on me a few times where the markers started getting really slow and like too juddery, and it kind of didn't work. I don't know whether that's the resolution of the icons I've used or what. But yeah, and if anyone wants to make some art for these that's a little bit different, that's cool. If people really love this and really enjoy this, and this kind of gets, you know, the virtual equivalent of a round of applause, I might go further with it. Taco actually has proper routes and stuff that it can do, and I could differentiate some kind of the marks. You know, there is... So I'll show you, one of the things I'd like to do is this green flag here. Well, what is this? This is what I've got called as a kite spot. But it's a very distinct kind of thing, right? Where you can drop down and there's a safe platform underneath you that people might not be ready for. And if they follow you when dropping down, 99% of the times they'll fall completely. And now you're safe on this and they can't get back up to you, right? And this technique you utilize in lots of places. I just have marked as flags, but I kind of feel like they're a separate story altogether. So yeah, anyway, there you go. I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks very much for watching. And yeah, hopefully the devs at some point actually do a pass on the maps. Maybe they could even use this marker pack to learn about their own game mode and, you know, make the tweaks as needed. So yeah, cheers guys. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.